You think you know Back to the Future. You've watched it. You've quoted it. You've probably seen it more times than you can count. But what if I told you that behind the laughter, behind the time machine, behind the iconic DeLorean, there were secrets that almost changed everything? Mistakes that slipped past the editors, battles that reshaped Hollywood, and moments so dangerous they could have ended the entire trilogy before it ever became a legend. This isn't just a movie story. This is the story of how a film survived rejection, recasting disasters, legal warfare, near-death accidents, presidential jokes, hidden bloopers, and alternate timelines, and still became one of the most beloved films in history. And the most surprising part? One of the biggest mistakes in the entire movie is still there, hiding in plain sight. Let's go back to the beginning. In 1980, two creative minds, Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale, sat together and imagined something unusual. What if you could travel back in time and meet your parents when they were your age? That single question sparked an idea that would eventually become Back to the Future. But at the time, it didn't feel revolutionary. It felt risky. They wrote the script. They believed in it. They thought studios would immediately see its potential. They were wrong. Over 40 studios rejected the film. The reason wasn't that the story lacked imagination. It was that Hollywood at the time preferred loud, edgy comedies filled with adult humor. Executives felt the script was too clean, too family-friendly, too innocent. It didn't fit the trend. And so, the project sat on the shelf. For years, everything changed when Robert Zemeckis directed Romancing the Stone in 1984. The film became a major success. Suddenly, studios were listening. Universal Pictures finally agreed to produce Back to the Future. But even then, challenges remained. Casting became the next obstacle. From the beginning, the creators wanted Michael J. Fox to play Marty McFly. They knew he had the perfect combination of charm, energy, and comedic timing. There was only one problem. He was already committed to a popular television show. The producers refused to release him. So, the filmmakers made a difficult decision. They cast Eric Stoltz. Filming began with Stoltz as Marty, but something fell off. Stoltz was talented. There was no question about that. However, Marty McFly wasn't supposed to feel intense and dramatic. He needed to feel spontaneous, playful, slightly mischievous. After weeks of shooting, the team realized the truth. The tone wasn't working. In one of the boldest decisions in Hollywood history, the filmmakers recast the lead role, even though it meant reshooting massive portions of the movie and spending millions more. Michael J. Fox finally stepped into the role. And this time, everything clicked. Production wrapped in April 1985. The release date was set for July. That left very little time for editing and final effects. Some visual effects weren't completely polished. Some details were rushed, but the studio pushed forward anyway. When the film was released, no one cared about imperfections. Audiences loved it instantly. The chemistry, the humor, the adventure. It exploded at the box office, eventually earning over $381 million worldwide, making it the highest-grossing film of 1985. It became more than a movie. It became a phenomenon. The soundtrack climbed the charts. The DeLorean became an icon. Marty McFly became a cultural symbol. And yet, even in a film this successful, something slipped through. Something small, but impossible to ignore once you notice it. Every movie has minor errors, but Back to the Future has a few that fans still talk about decades later. One of the most famous occurs during the videotape scene. In the story, Marty shows a recording of Doc Brown explaining time travel in 1985, but if you look closely at the original filming setup, the camera wasn't positioned to capture that dialogue. Yet, when the tape plays in 1955, the line appears clearly. It's a continuity inconsistency that survived editing. And because the scene is so engaging, most viewers never question it. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. Another example involves the Save the Clock Tower flyer. The flyer changes condition throughout the film. Sometimes crisp and clean, other times worn and wrinkled. In one moment, writing appears on the back before it logically should. Small details like this slipped through tight production schedules. There's also a background extra who appears to walk the same path repeatedly during a scene, creating a loop-like effect. Ironically, in a movie about time loops, the mistake almost feels intentional. But it wasn't. It was simply a human error. And those imperfections have become part of the film's charm. One of the most iconic moments in the film involves Marty telling Doc that Ronald Reagan is the president in 1985. Doc's reaction is priceless. The actor? At the time the movie is set in 1955, Ronald Reagan was known primarily as a Hollywood performer. The idea of him becoming president sounded absurd. But in real life, Reagan did become president. And when he watched the film at the White House, he reportedly loved the joke so much that he had it replayed. Later, during a State of the Union address, he quoted the line, "Where we're going, we don't need roads." A science fiction comedy had entered political history. Few films can claim that level of cultural impact. Not all behind-the-scenes stories were lighthearted. One of the most significant controversies involved Crispin Glover, who played George McFly in the first film. His performance was essential. George's transformation from timid to confident added emotional depth to the story. But when the sequel was being developed, negotiations broke down. There were disagreements about compensation and creative direction. Eventually, Glover did not return. Instead of recasting the role openly, the filmmakers used a facial mold from the first film and applied it to another actor wearing prosthetics. The character appeared in the sequel, but the face was recreated. Glover objected strongly. He believed his likeness was used without permission. He filed a lawsuit. The case settled, but its impact was enormous. Afterward, contracts in Hollywood began to include clearer rules about image rights and likeness protection. This case became a turning point in entertainment law. Today, in an era of digital recreation and artificial intelligence, the questions raised by that lawsuit feel even more relevant. Who owns a face? Where do rights begin and end? That legal battle helped shape the answers. While legal battles unfolded, Michael J. Fox was performing one of the most demanding acting roles in cinematic history. He didn't just memorize dialogue. He learned skills: skateboarding, guitar performance, horse riding, stunt coordination. For the famous school dance scene, he practiced the entire guitar solo until his movements matched the music perfectly. He worked closely with instructors to ensure authenticity. He didn't want the performance to feel staged. He wanted it to feel real. And it did. That scene remains one of the most celebrated moments in film history. In the third movie, set in the Old West, Fox had to learn new physical skills again. Different era, different challenges, different environment. Each film required transformation, and the effort was intense. Not every challenge was creative. Some were dangerous. During filming of the third installment, a stunt involving a hanging scene went wrong. The rope tightened more than expected, cutting off air supply. Fox lost consciousness briefly before the crew intervened. It was a real-life emergency. Later, he described the experience as terrifying. It reminded everyone that filmmaking can be physically risky, especially when stunts push limits. Other actors also committed fully to their roles. Some learned horseback riding for Western scenes. Others trained for fight sequences. The dedication across the cast elevated the trilogy. Early drafts of the sequel were very different. One version imagined time travel to the 1960s. Another explored darker tones. Casting alternatives were also considered for major roles. Several well-known actors were discussed for Doc Brown before Christopher Lloyd became the final choice. It's fascinating to imagine how different the trilogy would feel with a different cast, but the final combination created something unique. Chemistry matters, and this cast had it. Even with meticulous research, some details were imperfect. Calendar references in the script included technical inaccuracies. Certain historical events mentioned in passing were slightly misaligned with real-world timelines. Even the depiction of plutonium wasn't physically accurate. It was represented visually in a way that served storytelling rather than science. These are minor details, but fans who rewatch closely continue to spot them. What makes Back to the Future extraordinary isn't perfection. It's the combination of ambition, creativity, risk, and humanity. The bloopers didn't ruin it. The casting struggles didn't stop it. The legal battle didn't destroy it. The injuries didn't derail it. Instead, all of these elements became part of its legacy. Behind the polished surface was a production filled with pressure, innovation, and determination. And maybe that's why audiences still love it. Because it feels alive, not manufactured, not artificial, human. The film became more than entertainment. It became a cultural reference point. The DeLorean remains one of the most recognizable vehicles in cinema. The soundtrack continues to inspire new generations. The dialogue is still quoted. The themes, family, courage, responsibility, and consequence, still resonate. It was preserved as part of national cultural heritage, solidifying its status as more than just a box office hit. It became history. And yet, despite all the success, the hidden errors remain. Tiny continuity slips, visual inconsistencies, background anomalies. They survived editing. They survived test screenings. They survived decades of rewatching. And they continue to surprise new viewers today. That's the beauty of filmmaking. Even in a story about controlling time, time itself reveals imperfections. Back to the Future was born from rejection. It survived recasting chaos. It endured legal controversy. It faced dangerous stunts. It navigated alternate scripts. It overcame tight deadlines. And through it all, it became one of the most influential films ever made. But perhaps its greatest achievement isn't the box office numbers. It isn't the awards. It isn't even the cultural impact. It's that after all these years, people are still discovering details they never noticed before, still debating theories, still rewatching, still finding surprises hidden in time. And somewhere in that famous video scene or that flyer or that background moment, a small mistake is still waiting to be noticed. Because even in a story about time travel, nothing stays perfect forever. And that's exactly why it remains unforgettable.